Hello, and welcome to our virtual broadcast of our sessions, SRC's New EOC, presented by Brian Lockhart. Brian is an emergency management professional whose career spans service in the U.S. Air Force and multiple DOE sites. He currently serves as the Emergency Operations Manager for SRS and is on the project development team for the new EOC. If you have any questions during the session, use the chat tool on the right. Type in your questions and I'll relay these to the presenter if time permits. This is a little bit longer video, so we might not get to those. But please join me in welcoming Brian Lockhart to the virtual stage.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Brian Lockhart. I'm the Savannah River Site Emergency Operations Center Manager. I'm here to talk to you today about the SRS Emergency Operations Center Replacement Project. A little bit about myself. I've been on site for almost 5 years now. I started out as an emergency preparedness coordinator here on site, and then I worked my way up into the management position. Before here, I was actually a drill and exercise planner at WIP, helping with their recovery operations in 2015. Before then, I worked a little bit with FEMA at Region 4 in Atlanta. And then before that, 10 years active duty Air Force as an emergency manager. Right. So what we wanted to discuss with you today was give a brief presentation about where we're coming along with our new Emergency Operations Center. What I wanted to do was first discuss a little bit about the SRS background, some history with us, where we're at in our location. Then we're going to talk about some of the things that we thought about for planning, such as the requirements from the DOE order and also the location of where we were looking to house the new facilities. I also include our conceptual designs that we've created for both the primary emergency operations center and then also the Savannah River Site Operations Center, which we're actually doing a dual build with that. Give you the project timeline and some of the lessons learned that we've occurred during this planning and development process. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into a little bit about SRS. It's if you don't know, it's a 310 square mile installation located near Aiken, South Carolina on the Savannah River, and it borders South Carolina and Georgia. Covers almost 200,000 acres, and we have multiple counties, including Aiken County, Barnwell County, and Allendale counties here in South Carolina. And then we also have Richmond, Columbia County, and Burke County over on Georgia. Our current workforce is about 11,000 to 11,500 people, depending on the day. So what do we do out here? We process and store nuclear materials. We also have a national lab out here, and they're developing new technologies to help improve the environment. We also have a couple missions with Tritium and NNSA, and as we go forward with our missions, we're also developing new ones. A little bit more about SRS. Our emergency services capabilities. We have a 700 plus member security / protective force, 92 member fire department, which includes 3 fire stations, a full emergency medical service, hazmat response, rescue capabilities. We're also supported by a medical department, and of course, for our emergency response organization, we have a site ERO and also facility area ERO. The site ERO is pretty large. We have about 38 contractor positions and over 300 plus personnel assigned to the site ERO. Each facility has their own emergency response organization that some of those individuals will sit on the site ERO, and then a lot of them will just stay on the facility ERO in case there's an emergency there. For the emergency management team, for SRS. We have 30 plus members. We cover site level programs, operations, and COOP. That's basically it for the background on SRS as far as our capabilities. What we also are doing is building a new 24/7 SRS Operations Center in conjunction with the Emergency Operations Center. Now, the CIRSOC, or the Operations Center, is also a 911 response center. It's a state-registered PSAP, Public Safety Answering Point. So anybody that hits 911 that's on the outside, they're also going to reach into the CIRSOC, and we support a couple of the highways outside of the site. We also have a U.S. Forest Service contingent here on the site, and then we have over 30 qualified wildland firefighters who are also on call 24/7. If you're wondering why we're building two buildings, it's a good question. Currently, our primary EOC, and if you've ever been on SRS, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's housed in a building that has been around since the 1950s. So that building, where both the primary EOC and the CIRSOC are located, has not been able to meet habitability requirements or current building codes, and it's actually on the slot to be demoed. So we get to suffer through a lot of issues as far as our infrastructure. There's asbestos in the walls. We have mold. Sometimes if it rains really hard, and this is the Southeast, and so that means it rains about every afternoon during the summer, we sometimes have water intrusion that comes up through the bottom of the basement, through the floors where we're located. We also have failing infrastructure. And what I mean by that is because the building was built so long ago, we have a lot of HVAC issues or air quality issues. And sometimes it's very difficult for us to even find parts to replace or to fix our current HVAC. So we have issues with that. As you can see on the slide, it says that the current EOC was retrofitted in 1994. So that tells you that our infrastructure and our wiring and a lot of our stuff is from 1994. So it can be a little bit difficult. In the picture that you see that I've posted, that's actually a picture of our command room in the EOC. We do have computers and we do have, some modern telephones, but they are limited due to funding. So we try to make do the best that we can with the computers that we have, using the systems that we have, and try to make it through. All this plays into the big reason of why we're actually building the primary EOC and a new CIRSOC is to bring us up into modern technology. So some of the planning considerations that we did going into this is we wanted to contain both the CIRSOC and the EOC under one roof still, so that way they could share walls and it would actually reduce cost of building two separate buildings. There also in this project is a design for an alternate CIRSOC, because our alternate CIRSOC is also located in a building that doesn't meet requirements for the DOE order and also for NFPA standards for call centers. Our planned occupancy of the new build is about 350. We had to build it to the amount of people that we have on our currently on our ERO, our site ERO. As I said, the CIRSOC is 24/7. We have about anywhere between 15 to 20 people on staff during the day. However, we can bump that up if we receive or are in the middle of an event or an incident. We can bring more people in to help us answer phone calls. For the occupancy of the EOC, we decided to also house our emergency management personnel in the new build. So At least 36 people will be in there, and that includes our EM staff, our site consolidated drill team, and exercise staff, or we like to call them the tech. And so some other planning considerations is that we weren't allowed to have both the primary and alternate SEERSOC just not affected by the same natural phenomenon hazard event. It's the same thing with a primary EOC and an alternate EOC. And because we have tritium here on the site, we had to come up with some compensatory measures to deal with that if there was a release. So, like I said earlier, some of the considerations that we had were, requirements out of 151.1D. EOC must be capable of sustaining emergency operations for a minimum of 72 hours. We have to have an alternate EOC capability that can perform the key functions of the primary if the primary EOC is not available. And they both need to be located out of, both must be located to where they're outside all EPZs, or located so both the primary and the alternate are not impacted by the same event. And also with the SEERSOC, we had NFPA requirements that we had to consider because it is a call center and also a fire alarm monitoring station. The big thing with planning for a new site is location, location, location. If you look at the graph right here, our proposed site location is still in the same area as the primary, and we have located them opposite outside of EPZs, so they cannot be impacted by the same event. If there's a tritium event, we've planned for being able to either go virtually or try to mitigate that using one of the locations versus the other location. That's a little bit about the planning considerations, how we decided to go about locating it. We wanted to make sure the site for both builds was in a geographically separated area that made sense. Still on site so we could limit access or control access to the center, but far away from the hazard facilities to where we're out of the EPZs. Going into it, we looked at a couple different sites. We looked at our local county EOCs, and we also went to Charleston Air Force Base and looked at their emergency operations center. And as well, we went to the Georgia State Emergency Management Agency EOC, and we took a couple ideas from both, and instead of incorporating one design in one area, we kind of made it a hybrid that works best for us. The design that you're looking at right now, this is a conceptual design. This isn't exactly how it's going to look, but this is what we put together for both the one building, both the EOC and the SEERSOC. The primary EOC, like I said, is a hybrid, basically, of how current EOCs are I should say civilian EOCs are set up, with using emergency support functions versus a DOE kind of traditional emergency operations center. If you look at the design, you'll see that if you've ever been out here, it's kind of similar, but it's a lot different. We've added a lot more breakout rooms for individuals to get into, public information areas. Currently, right now, our public information area is kind of like in a bad spot, and then our JIC is separated, or our Joint Information Center is separated from the site. And so what we've tried to do is just consolidate that so we're in one space, and then if we have to do any kind of public addresses or anything like that, we would pick a predetermined location outside the gate or at the barricade or one of those places. If you look down on the bottom of the design, you'll see the technical support room and the consequence assessment room are connected. In our current location, these two functions are separated by a good distance. So it's kind of difficult for a technical support room to work hand in hand with a consequence assessment room without leaving the room. So what we did in our design was combine them to allow them to have free flow of information between each other, and it allows them to work better together. We added a multi-use conference area. If you can see that, it's just a big conference area that we can turn into another technical support room if we have multiple facilities affected by a single event or multiple events. If you look towards the middle of the drawing, you will see a very large command area, and we just threw in a horseshoe table pattern right now just as a placeholder. That's not necessarily how we want to function or set up our command table with the commanding people and the executive. Basically, that is just a placeholder. Conceptual design that we could just put in there just as a placeholder. So you can see we have a very large command area that will have way more tables, way more chairs to be able to house the over 300 personnel that we're expecting. And then in the back of the command area, you'll see the executive team suite, which allows them to come in and then be focused into their room, keeping them out of the command area to allow the emergency director to perform his duties without interference from the executives. You'll see also to the right a common area with a kitchen and pantry and bathrooms and lockers. This is all done so that we can have that minimum 72-hour operations time. We're also going to have beds and cots and food available to our personnel if they have to stay overnight or anything like that and are not allowed to leave the site. Don't ask me what food we're going to go with. We haven't reached that point yet. So that's still in discussions whenever we get into the design phase of the next year. Coming back to the EOC area, you'll see administrative area, those breakout rooms like I mentioned, the public information area. We're also going to put in a secure video conference area that allow us to have secure communications in the event of a hazmat release or something that requires secure communications. And if you go back up to the previous slide, as I mentioned before, you'll see off to the side of the functional areas that I described, off to the left are a bunch of offices, and that's where we're going to house our drill team and our emergency management staff. All right, moving from the primary EOC over to the primary SEERSOC, the top operating area to the computer electronics locker will all be a limited area as by requirement. So all of those are workstations where we can receive 911 calls, operate out of, receive fire alarms, any of those emergency items that we need to do and dispatch out of. That'll be the operating area. As you can see, there will be a break room and some restrooms for the personnel inside the limited area as per requirement and code. And then we will have a computer server area, fairly large. That's what it looks like. And then on the opposite side of the limited area is where you'll find the offices for the operations personnel. So those are our conceptual designs, our sketches, where we're at so far. Some of the project timelines that we've gotten into and our milestones. Our CD0 was approved in 2017. We completed an analysis of alternatives, or an AOA, which was a separate outside team that came in and evaluated the areas that we wanted to put the new build. And so they completed that December 2018. For the last year and a half, we've been working on CD1, and it was revised and approved to December 2018. And then we were able to complete it and transmit it to Department of Energy this year, April 15th, 2020, and then it was approved June 2020 this year. So right now, we are beginning our design phase. This is the fun part of it, where we get to determine exactly what kind of technology we want to put into the center, and then go from there and design it how we want to. So some lessons learned from this whole process. The hardest part was really discovering what is a want versus a need. So, we wanted to upgrade our technology. That was a given. But we also wanted to make sure that we are designing the facility for future needs, whether or not we can expand or maybe, shrink down, and then find another spot for any of that, or another reason to have the space that we did. So the benchmarking was crucial for us. We had to see a bunch of different emergency operations center, like I mentioned, the GEMA EOC, Charleston Air Force Base EOC, and Aiken County EOC. And then plus I drew upon a lot of my experience in the military, seeing the different EOCs at the different Air Force bases. Also, a lesson learned is ensuring that you have everybody that is required on the project to be involved in the design process. You don't want to have any cybersecurity issues pop up late into the game, because that, as we know, cybersecurity can really hinder your planning if it's not considered upfront. Also, determining our future state of operations. How do we want to continue to have an ERO the size that we do? Do we want to switch it up, or switch up how we perform the functions? Those are all things that we wanted, or that we needed to figure out, and then we had to be sure to include any future missions that we already knew about. Really, those were the biggest lessons learned. I'm sure as we go into more into the design phase, there's going to be so many more lessons learned. But just right now, because it's conceptual, I think this kind of sums it up the best in the best way. So those were some of the lessons learned. So we discussed today the purpose of the project. We learned that our current situation is not ideal for continuous or sustained operations in there. And I told you about our design concepts, our planning considerations. We looked at the design or the conceptual designs, how we think we want it to look. Talked about some lessons learned. That's about all that I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks for your time and informative presentation, Brian. I'm sorry to say we've reached the end of our session. So for those of you who do have questions, please click on Brian's name beneath this video, and you'll get his email and you can send him your question that way. Also, don't forget to click on the survey icon at the bottom of the screen and complete it so that you can get your attendance credit. This is our last session on this channel for the day, but meet me here for our virtual, or not here, but at the right time, for our virtual happy hour at 3 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, where we'll be competing for the best mask. And I've got some really good questions as well that I'd like to get your opinions on. So please join us here tomorrow for another day of great presentations. Thanks so much, people.